Every time my wife stayed late at the gym, I didn't know it would lead to. I never thought I'd be one of those guys. You know, the ones who sit at home questioning every little thing their wife does. But here I am. I've been married to Rachel for almost 6 years. We met in college, and it was one of those whirlwind romances that just made sense. We were inseparable back then, and nothing felt better than having her by my side. We got married a year after graduation, settled down in a nice suburban home, and started living what I thought was a dream life. Everything was great, or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. It all started when she joined this gym about 6 months ago. Rachel's always been into fitness, but something changed after she signed up for personal training sessions. She'd always been enthusiastic about her workouts, but now it was different. She was going 5, sometimes 6 days a week, and she seemed distant, like she was there, but not really there. She'd come home, sweaty but glowing, and then hop in the shower without even a word. She was staying out later than usual, claiming she was hitting the sauna or doing yoga after her session. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, she's my wife. I trust her. But then I started noticing little things. She was spending more time on her phone, always typing away when she thought I wasn't looking. She'd leave the room to take calls, whispering in the hallway like it was no big deal. When I asked her about it, she'd brush it off. "Oh, it's just Emily from work," or "just making some plans for the weekend, babe. Nothing to worry about." I shrugged it off because I didn't want to be that husband, the paranoid guy who jumps to conclusions without any evidence. But it kept gnawing at me. Something wasn't right. One evening, I decided to surprise her at the gym. It was a Thursday, her legs and core day, according to the calendar on the fridge. I knew her usual schedule, so I figured I'd bring her a smoothie or something. Maybe we'd have a laugh about me playing the supportive husband role. When I walked into the gym, the receptionist greeted me like normal, but when I asked where Rachel was, her eyes flickered, like she knew something I didn't. "She's probably finishing up her session with Nick," she said with a too-tight smile. "You can wait in the lounge if you'd like." Nick, the trainer. Of course, I knew he was. Rachel had mentioned him in passing, like he was just some guy helping her reach her fitness goals. But something about the way the receptionist said his name, it didn't sit right with me. I headed toward the training area, determined to surprise Rachel. That's when I saw them. When I saw them, my stomach dropped. Rachel and Nick were standing in the corner of the gym near the free weights, but they weren't working out. Not really. She was leaning against one of those benches, laughing at something he'd said, and he was standing too close. Way too close. His hand was on her arm, lingering just a little too long. I froze, unable to move or think straight. Was this innocent? Was I just reading too much into it? But as I watched, things got worse. Rachel looked up at him with a smile. That smile, the one she used to give me when we were first dating. She was glowing, and it wasn't from the workout. It was like she was someone else entirely, and Nick, he leaned in even closer. That's when they disappeared into one of the back rooms. It was Mark staff only. But I didn't care. My legs moved before I had a chance to stop myself, and I found myself near the door, heart pounding out of my chest. I could hear muffled voices from the other side. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could hear enough to know that this wasn't some casual conversation about sets and reps. I felt a rush of nausea hit me as I stood there, debating what to do. Should I barge in? Should I confront them? My hands were shaking, and I felt this horrible mix of rage and fear swelling inside me. But part of me still hoped I was wrong. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe this was some misunderstanding. That hope shattered when I heard a soft laugh, followed by something I never expected. Rachel's voice, low and playful, saying, "You know we shouldn't be doing this here." That was it. My world crashed down around me. I stood there frozen, her words echoing in my head. "You know we shouldn't be doing this here." There was no more doubt, no way to rationalize it. My mind went blank as I heard Nick respond, his voice equally low. "Come on, just a little longer. No one's going to find out. I felt like I was going to be sick. This wasn't happening. Not Rachel. Not my wife. But there was no denying it anymore. She was cheating on me with her trainer, right there in the gym where she'd been coming almost every day for months. I had been blind. I stepped back, trying to decide what to do next. My first instinct was to kick down the door and drag them both out, make a scene. But something inside me stopped me. It wasn't fear, it wasn't cowardice, it was something darker. I wanted to see how far this had gone, how deep her betrayal really was. I waited. Time felt like it stretched on forever, but it couldn't have been more than a few minutes. Eventually, the door opened and Rachel stepped out first. She didn't see me. She was too busy adjusting her clothes, smoothing down her hair, looking like she had just finished a workout. Nick followed, his hand grazing the small of her back as he whispered something I couldn't hear. They laughed, and she smiled at him. That smile again. My blood boiled. It was like I didn't exist to her. She had no idea I had just witnessed the whole thing. And then she turned and walked toward the exit. I stood there, my hands clenched into fists, watching her walk away like nothing had happened. Like she was going home to me, her loving husband, completely unaware that I had just caught her. I wasn't sure what to do next. Should I confront her here? Should I wait until we were home? My mind raced as I followed her out of the gym, careful to stay just far enough behind that she wouldn't notice me. Whatever happened next, I knew this was just the beginning of something much darker. I followed Rachel out of the gym, my heart racing as I tried to make sense of what I had just witnessed. She didn't notice me at all, completely wrapped up in her little world, as if nothing had happened, as if she wasn't hiding the biggest secret of our marriage. She walked to her car, a bounce in her step that used to be reserved for me. It felt like I was watching a stranger, someone I didn't know anymore. I kept my distance, not wanting to confront her there, in front of the gym, in front of people. Not yet. There was still this part of me that didn't want to believe it. I needed more. I needed to hear it from her. As she started the car, I headed toward mine, parked a few rows away. I got in and sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm myself down. I didn't want to explode, not yet. My mind raced with all the ways this could go down. But one thing was clear. I had to act soon. I tailed her on the drive home, my eyes glued to her car the entire time. I imagined her sitting there, maybe scrolling through her phone, texting Nick, laughing at something he said, completely unaware that I was right behind her. The thought of her being so carefree, after everything she'd done, made my blood boil. By the time we pulled into the driveway, I had decided I wasn't going to wait until later. I couldn't. I needed answers now. Rachel parked and walked into the house, and I followed a few steps behind. She still hadn't seen me. It was eerie how oblivious she was, humming to herself as she opened the front door. I walked in right behind her, not bothering to make a sound. She headed straight for the kitchen, putting her gym bag down and grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. I stood in the doorway, watching her, trying to keep my voice steady, but my hands were shaking. "Hey, Ratch," I said, my voice louder than I intended. She turned around, startled, almost dropping the bottle. "Oh my God, you scared me," she laughed, her smile still placid on her face. But there was something off about it. "What are you doing here? I didn't even hear you come in." I stepped closer, my pulse pounding in my ears. "We need to talk." Rachel froze, the bottle of water still in her hand. The smile slowly faded from her face as she saw the look in my eyes. I could tell she sensed something was wrong, but she tried to brush it off, playing innocent like she always did when she didn't want to have a serious conversation. "Sure, what's up?" she said, her voice casual, almost too casual, like she was trying to keep things light. I stepped closer, feeling the tension in the air thicken with every second. "I went to the gym today," I said, watching her reaction closely. Her eyes flickered for just a second, something between surprise and panic flashing across her face. But she recovered quickly. "Oh, you should have told me. We could have worked out together," she said, smiling again, but it was forced now. She was trying too hard. I wasn't having it. I didn't see you working out. Her smile faltered. What do you mean? I was there. You must have just missed me. She took a sip of water, avoiding my eyes. The lie came so easily to her. It made me sick. I didn't miss you, I said, my voice cold. I saw you with him. Rachel froze, the bottle halfway to her lips. Her face went pale, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I could see the guilt written all over her face. Who? She asked, but her voice had dropped, the playfulness gone. She was stalling, trying to figure out what I knew, how much I had seen. Nick, I said, the name feeling like poison in my mouth. I saw you with Nick. There was a long pause, the silence between us almost unbearable. She looked down, her hands trembling just slightly. It's not what you think, she whispered, but even she didn't sound convinced. Then what is it, Rachel? I shot back, my voice rising with anger. What the hell was I watching if it wasn't what I think? You disappearing into that room with him, laughing, touching him. Don't lie to me. I want the truth. Her eyes darted around the room like she was searching for an escape, but there was none. She was cornered, and we both knew it. Rachel didn't say anything for a moment. She just stood there, staring at the floor, her hands still trembling. I could see her trying to come up with something, some excuse or explanation, but there was no way out now. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay, I am sorry. Sorry, I echoed, my anger rising again. For what? For lying to me? For sneaking around with him? You think sorry is going to fix this? She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. It's not what you think it's. Stop lying, I yelled, cutting her off. Just stop. I don't want to hear another lie. I saw you. I heard you. How long has this been going on? She wiped her eyes, trying to keep herself together, but I could see her falling apart. It's not serious, she said, her voice shaking. It didn't mean anything, I swear. I laughed bitterly. Didn't mean anything? You disappear with him into the back room, and I'm supposed to believe it didn't mean anything? What? It was just a fling. A fun little gym distraction. Rachel's face crumpled, and the tears started flowing. I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't, she broke off, choking on her words. It just happened. That's your excuse? It just happened. I stepped closer, my voice deadly calm now. How many times, Rachel? She looked away, biting her lip. I don't know, she muttered. A few, maybe more. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, had been sleeping with this guy for who knows how long. And now she was standing here, admitting it like it was some mistake she made by accident. Why? I asked, my voice quiet now, the anger slowly giving way to something else. Why him? Why now? Rachel hesitated, wiping her face again, struggling to find the words. I don't know, she whispered. I wasn't happy. I know that's not fair, and it's not your fault. You're a good husband, but I got lost. He made me feel. Don't you dare say he made you feel something I couldn't, I snapped. Don't try to pin this on me. She shook her head, crying harder now. I'm not trying to blame you. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. I messed up, okay? I made a terrible mistake, and I hate myself for it. But her words rang hollow. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice, a series of choices. And now, everything we had built was crumbling. Her tears didn't move me. I stood there, numb, feeling the weight of every lie she had told me over the past few months. How many nights had I sat at home, thinking she was at the gym, working on herself, while she was really with him? How many times had I trusted her, only to be played for a fool? I don't even know who you are anymore, I said quietly, my voice filled with exhaustion. The Rachel I married would never do this. She wiped her face again, but the tears kept coming. I'm still me. I just made a mistake. A mistake, I repeated, shaking my head. Rachel, this isn't just some one-time mistake. You kept doing it. You chose him over and over again. You lied to me. You hid it. That's not a mistake. That's betrayal. She broke down, sinking into one of the kitchen chairs, sobbing into her hands. I never wanted to hurt you, she cried. I love you. I still love you. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at that. Love me? Is that what you call this? Sneaking around with another man, lying to my face and telling me you love me. She looked up, her face red and streaked with tears. I do love you, I swear. I don't want to lose you. But it was too late. I could feel it. Something inside me had broken. The trust we had, the bond we shared, it was gone, shattered into 1,000 pieces. How could I ever look at her the same way again? How could I ever believe a word she said? I leaned against the counter, trying to collect my thoughts. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to throw things, to storm out of the house and never come back. But another part of me, maybe the part that still loved her, wanted answers, wanted to understand why this had happened, how we had gotten here. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked, my voice hoarse. If you were unhappy, why didn't you talk to me? We could have worked on it. We could have fixed things. But instead, you went to him. Rachel sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. I didn't know how, she whispered. I was scared. I thought if I told you how I felt, you'd hate me. And now, I asked, my anger returning, what do you think this is? You've destroyed us, Rachel. Her shoulders shook with sobs, but I didn't feel sympathy. I didn't feel much of anything anymore. I don't know what to do, she said, her voice trembling. Please, just give me a chance. We can fix this. I'll do anything. But I wasn't sure there was anything left to fix. Rachel sat there, sobbing, her words barely making it through her tears. I'll do anything to fix this. Please, I don't want to lose you. But her words just hung in the air. What do you expect me to do? I asked, my voice hard. Act like everything's fine? Pretend I didn't see what I saw. She shook her head, her voice trembling. No, I just need you to give me a chance. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I'll quit the gym. I'll block his number. I'll do whatever you want. I sighed, the weight of everything crushing down on me. It's not that simple, Rachel. It's not just about stopping. You lied to me over and over again. You made me look like an idiot. I could feel the frustration rising, the betrayal cutting deeper the more I spoke. How am I supposed to move past that? Her tears fell harder. I don't know, but I'll do whatever it takes. I'll go to therapy. We can go together. Please, just don't leave. I shook my head, the hurt and anger mixing with exhaustion. I don't know if I can live with this. Every time I see you, I'm going to remember what you did. How do you expect me to trust you again? Rachel wiped at her face, her voice breaking. I love you. I'll never do this again. I promise. I stared at her, trying to feel something other than betrayal, but it was too late. I need space, I finally said, the words cutting through the room. I can't stay here. Not with you. Her face turned pale, and she reached out toward me, but I stepped back. Are you leaving me? She asked, panic in her voice. I don't know, I said honestly, but I need to be away from you. I can't even think straight right now. Grabbing my keys, I headed for the door. I'll be staying somewhere else for a while, I added, not turning back to see her reaction. And then without another word, I walked out. The door clicked shut behind me, and I stood on the porch for a moment, the weight of everything hitting me all over again. My hands were still shaking, and the reality of what had just happened started to settle in. I had walked out. For the first time since we got married, I had chosen to leave. I climbed into the car and sat there, staring at the steering wheel. My phone buzzed, and I didn't have to look to know it was Rachel, probably texting, begging me to come back. But I didn't check it. I couldn't. I just needed to be alone, away from everything, away from her. I started the car and pulled out of the driveway, my mind racing with no clear direction of where to go. Driving felt like the only thing I could do, so I headed nowhere in particular, letting the road distract me from the mess waiting for me back home. How had we ended up here? A few months ago, everything seemed fine, or at least, that's what I thought. Now, looking back, I couldn't tell if I had missed the signs or if she had just gotten better at hiding them. Either way, I felt like a fool. I pulled into a parking lot of a diner on the edge of town, needing to stop driving before my thoughts spun out of control. Sitting in the dimly lit car, I thought about calling someone, my brother maybe, but I wasn't ready to explain everything yet. How do you even tell someone your wife's been sleeping with another man? How do you admit that your marriage has been built on lies for who knows how long? I glanced at my phone again, still vibrating with missed calls and messages from Rachel. I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. I'd have to face it eventually, figure out what came next, but not tonight. Tonight, I just sat there, staring out at the empty parking lot, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I thought about the first time I met Rachel, how we clicked instantly, how everything seemed to fall into place so perfectly. We were supposed to be each other's forever. And now, forever didn't seem real anymore. I leaned back in the seat, staring up at the ceiling of the car. The silence was deafening, but it was the only thing I had right now. For the first time in my life, I didn't know what to do. The night felt endless. I must have sat in that parking lot for hours, staring at nothing, trying to make sense of everything. It was as if my mind had short-circuited, unable to process the reality of what had just happened. I kept replaying the confrontation with Rachel in my head, her tears, her desperate promises, but none of it made a difference. Eventually, I pulled out my phone, hesitating before opening the text. As expected, there were a dozen messages from Rachel. Please come back. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. Please don't leave us like this. I love you. I'll do anything. Each message felt heavier than the last, but they all blended into the same thing. Please for forgiveness, for another chance. Part of me almost wanted to respond, to say something, anything, but what could I say? That I forgave her? That everything would be okay? I couldn't lie to myself like that. Not yet. I closed the messages without replying and tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. My mind wandered, searching for something to grab onto, but nothing made sense. I felt lost in the very life I'd been building for years. I thought about my options and none of them felt right. Leaving her? Staying? Could I really walk away from 6 years of marriage? But how could I stay, knowing what I knew now? Even if she cut things off with Nick, even if she went to therapy, how could I ever trust her again? The betrayal was too deep, too real. It wasn't just the affair, it was the lies, the secret life she had been living behind my back. I sighed, realizing there were no answers waiting for me tonight. My mind kept racing, but it was like running in circles. At some point, I started the car again, heading toward a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. I needed a place to crash, and I couldn't bear to go back home. Not tonight. I checked in, threw my keys on the table, and collapsed onto the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. As I lay there, I realized how heavy everything felt. The weight of the betrayal, the weight of the decisions I knew I'd have to make. Nothing would be the same after this. I wasn't ready to think about what came next. All I knew was that the life I had thought was mine, my marriage, my future with Rachel, was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I barely slept. The motel bed was stiff, and the thin walls didn't block out the sounds of passing cars and late-night conversations. But that wasn't the real reason. It was the thoughts, relentless, cycling through my mind. What had my marriage really been? How long had I been blind to the truth? By the time morning light crept through the flimsy curtains, I felt more drained than before. I stared at the ceiling, not wanting to move. I wasn't ready to face the world yet, let alone Rachel. But I had to. Eventually, I'd have to go back, figure out what to do next. I checked my phone, more missed texts from Rachel. She had clearly been up all night, her messages becoming more frantic. The last one caught my eye. "Please just tell me you're okay. I'm scared. I can't lose you like this." A part of me felt guilty. Despite everything, she was still my wife. But then the anger would rush back in, remembering how she had smiled with Nick, how she had lied to my face for months. I tossed my phone back down. I wasn't ready to answer her yet, not until I knew what I wanted to say. I took a shower, letting the hot water run too long, hoping it would wash away the confusion. It didn't. The only thing I knew for sure was that this wasn't something we could fix overnight. Maybe not ever. When I finally left the motel, the cool morning air hit my face, and reality set in again. I couldn't avoid this forever, so I drove, not home, but aimlessly around town. I passed the park where Rachel and I used to go when we first started dating. I passed a coffee shop where we had our first awkward conversation. Everywhere I went was a reminder of the life we had built together. And now, all of it felt fragile, like it could crumble at any second. I knew I couldn't keep running. Eventually, I found myself driving back toward the house. My heart pounded as I pulled into the driveway. The sight of our home, the one we'd built, where we'd shared so many memories, made the situation even harder to grasp. I didn't know what I'd say when I walked through the door. I didn't know if I was ready for whatever conversation awaited me. But I couldn't stay out forever. I stepped out of the car, took a deep breath, and walked toward the door, feeling the weight of the moment in every step. I stepped inside the house, the silence heavier than I remembered. Rachel appeared from the hallway, her face red and puffy from crying. "You came back," she whispered, her voice fragile. I nodded, not sure how to respond. I hadn't figured out what I was going to do, but I knew avoiding her wasn't an option anymore. Rachel stepped closer, cautiously. "I didn't know if you would." "I wasn't sure either," I admitted, my voice low. I could hear the exhaustion in my words, the frustration still bubbling underneath. She wiped her tears, her voice trembling. "I know I messed up. I'll do anything, therapy, quitting the gym, just don't leave." I stared at her, feeling the weight of the betrayal. "It's not about fixing things like that. You lied to me, Rachel, every day, while you were with him." "I know," she sobbed, "but I love you. I never stopped." "How could you say you loved me when you did this?" I asked, my voice breaking. She shook her head, wiping her face. "I don't have an excuse, but I want to make it right. Please don't leave." I sighed, feeling torn. "I need time. I can't figure this out right now." Rachel nodded, her voice barely audible. "I'll wait as long as you need." The following days felt like I was living in a fog. I stayed at home, but the house didn't feel like home anymore. Every glance at Rachel was a reminder of what she had done, and every silence between us was filled with the weight of the past. She tried to act normal, doing little things like making coffee in the morning, asking if I wanted dinner, but it felt forced, awkward, like she was trying to patch up something that was beyond repair. I couldn't bring myself to engage. I couldn't just act normal. I spent most of my time in the spare room, avoiding her as much as I could. Every time she walked past, I could feel her eyes on me, waiting for me to say something, anything, about what I was thinking. But I had nothing to give her. I didn't even know how I felt myself. One evening, as I sat staring at my phone, Rachel knocked on the door softly. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice small. I didn't answer at first, but she stood there waiting, and I knew this conversation was inevitable. I couldn't avoid it forever. "Okay," I said, motioning for her to sit. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, looking down. I know I can't undo what I did," she began, "but I need to know if there's still a chance for us." I didn't respond right away. The words stuck in my throat. Did I want there to be a chance? Could I even imagine a future with her after everything? I don't know. I finally said, my voice strained. I don't know if I can trust you again. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she nodded, accepting it. I understand, but I love you, and I'll wait as long as it takes for you to figure it out. That's what made it even harder. She kept saying she loved me, but how could love lead to something like this? The pain was too fresh, too real. I didn't know if love was enough to fix what was broken. I need more time, I said quietly. Rachel nodded again, her face pale. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. She left the room, leaving me with the same knot of confusion I had been carrying since the moment I found out. Nothing felt certain anymore, not our future, and not the feelings I had for her. The days kept passing, each one blending into the next, with no real progress. Rachel and I barely spoke beyond the basics, and every conversation felt like we were walking on eggshells. I could see her trying, her eyes always searching mine for some sign of hope, but I had nothing to give her. My heart was still too raw. One night, unable to sleep, I went for a drive. The house felt suffocating, and I needed space to think. I found myself parked at a spot by the lake, a place Rachel and I used to go when we first started dating. It was where we used to dream about our future, back when everything was simple. Sitting there, staring at the water, I felt the weight of everything hit me at once. The anger, the betrayal, the sadness. It all came rushing back, but this time, it wasn't as overwhelming. Instead, there was a strange kind of calm underneath it all. I realized that I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I had to make a decision for both our sakes. I wasn't sure what that decision would be, but I knew I couldn't keep dragging this out, pretending like time alone would heal everything. Time wasn't enough. I had to confront what I really wanted. When I got back to the house, Rachel was waiting in the living room. She looked up at me, her face tired, like she hadn't been sleeping either. We can't keep doing this, I said, standing in the doorway. We're just stuck in the same place, and it's tearing us both apart. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, understanding. I know, she whispered. I just don't know how to move forward. I don't either, I admitted, but I know we can't keep pretending that things will go back to normal. They won't. She wiped her eyes, looking down at her hands. What do you want to do? The question hung in the air, and for the first time, I felt a sense of clarity. I wasn't ready to end things yet, but I also wasn't ready to fully forgive her. What I needed was space, real space, to figure out if I could ever trust her again. I need some time apart, I said, my voice steady. Not just in the house, but real space. I think we should separate for a while, see where we both stand. Rachel's face crumpled, but she didn't argue. She just nodded, her voice barely audible. If that's what you need, then I'll give it to you. It was the hardest thing I'd ever said, but I knew it was the only way forward. For both of us. After a month of being apart, Rachel asked to meet. We chose a quiet cafe, neutral ground where we could finally talk. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting on the table as she struggled to find the right words. I've been thinking, she said softly. I realize we can't go back. We're not who we were. I nodded. I had come to the same realization, though hearing her say it out loud made it feel final. I tried to forgive you, I said, my voice steady. But every time I think about what happened, I know things can't be the same anymore. Tears welled up in her eyes. I know I've hurt you. I'll regret it for the rest of my life. We sat there, both of us knowing what had to come next, but not wanting to say it. Finally, I spoke. I think it's time we let go. For both of us. Rachel wiped her eyes, nodding through the tears. You're right. We can't keep dragging this out. The moment felt surreal. After all the pain, the anger, the uncertainty, we were both calm. There was no more fighting. No more trying to fix what couldn't be repaired. Just quiet acceptance. I'll start the paperwork, I said. We'll keep it simple. I don't want to make this harder than it needs to be. She nodded again, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. When we finally stood to leave, Rachel reached out and hugged me. It wasn't desperate, just a soft goodbye. I hugged her back, not out of obligation, but out of respect for what we had shared. We had once loved each other deeply, but now it was time to move on. As I walked to my car, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. The pain of betrayal would always be there, but the chapter was closing. Now, it was time for both of us to start over, separately.